Hi, everyone, and welcome to Inside Bristol. I'm your host, Sheridan Nichols, and we are still coming to you from my house here. And we're going to start and kick off the show today with June Iljana, and she is from the U.S. Census Bureau's regional office. She'll be telling us how to know when a census worker shows up at our door that it truly is a census worker. Here she is with those details.
I'm June Iljana, and I work for the U.S. Census Bureau in Tennessee. I wanted to let the residents of Bristol know that soon we will begin sending census takers to homes that haven't yet responded to the census on their own. You know when someone comes to your door that they in fact are a census taker because they will be carrying a shoulder bag with a census logo on it, and they'll have a device issued by the Census Bureau with the Census Bureau logo on it. It might be a cell phone or it might be a tablet. You can also verify their identity by the census-issued photo ID they'll be carrying, and you can ask them for a second form of ID to verify that. If you still are not sure, you can go on to census.gov and you can verify that they're an employee there. But to prevent anyone from coming to your home to collect your census data, just give it to us. You can log on at 2020census.gov. It's a very quick and easy process to enter your address and respond to the census there. It should only take 5 or 10 minutes. Or you can respond to the census by phone. Just call 844-330-2020 and you can provide your information by phone and get it done that way. Another option is that if you have a census questionnaire, you can fill it out and just mail it back in and you'll be counted that way. Any way you do it, everyone who responds to the census on their own reduces the workload for our census takers. We have a short timeline to get this done, so that's very important. You can respond to the census all the way through October 31st, but please don't delay. The more people who respond now on their own, the less work we will have in trying to make sure everyone's counted, and that is very important. Every person who's counted in Bristol brings more money back to the state and to the city to pay for services that everyone uses, like education, healthcare, roads, and fire departments. You owe it to your neighbors to make sure that you're counted. Everyone benefits, and there's absolutely no risk in responding to the census. The Census Bureau cannot, under federal law, release your information to anyone. It's perfectly safe.
Thanks so much for letting us know, and we will definitely take those tips to heart. Well, coming up next, we're going to hear from Nancy Arnold. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Inside Bristol. I'm your host, Sheridan Nichols, and up next, we're going to hear from Nancy Arnold. She's on the YWCA's Board of Directors, and she's going to tell us about an exciting event that's going on at the train station on August 10th. Here she is.
In 2016, Barter Theater produced a play written by Catherine Bush, their resident playwright, about women's suffrage. It was called Winter Wheat in 2016, and I saw that play and I was amazed. I was bolted over with the story of women's suffrage and the struggle. I always just assumed women were given the right to vote, and that was it, but that is not the case. Also, I grew up in Knoxville, Tennessee. I took 7th grade Tennessee history. I never heard the story about Tennessee's involvement in the ratification of the 19th Amendment. And again, I was so shocked with that story. And I became very interested, and of course the 100th anniversary is this year. So we were planning last year all these celebrations in conjunction with the Bristol Historical Association and the YWCA and the train station. So we're all hoping that on August the 10th, Monday evening at 7 o'clock at the train station, with social distancing and mask, that we can hear the history of the women's suffrage movement. So we're planning a kind of a gala celebration of that. Abigail Adams wrote to John Adams even when they were trying to write the Constitution of the United States, and said, "John, please remember the ladies," because women could not vote. They did not even own their own children. everything they earned, everything they made belonged to their man. And they could not vote for any elections. They could not serve on jury duties. And so it goes way back then. The first real movement was in 1848 with a gathering at Seneca Falls, New York. And out of that, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott were our early founders. And they shocked this convention by declaring, they called it a Declaration of Sentiments that was based on the Declaration of Independence, which said all men and women are equal, which had never been stated before. She also shocked the convention by asking for many different rights in marriages, in economic and employment, and she asked that women be given the vote. That was very radical then. The Civil War came, and they kind of let up with their efforts until after the war. Susan B. Anthony came on the scene, and she became a very staunch leader in the women's movement. It was very tied in with equality for all men and women to get the vote. Only white men at that point could vote. They wanted to see all men and women, but the country was not ready for those two issues. So finally, the black men were given the right to vote in the 14th Amendment. That was a bitter defeat for these women suffragists, but they kept forging on. And if you remember the date, 1848 was that very first convention until the date of 1920. It was a 72-year long struggle to give women the right to vote. It kept going on, and many African American suffragists were involved, strong women, and they suffered a double discrimination because they were women and they were black. There were many strong white suffrage women that led this fight forward. In 1917, President Wilson, who was not for women's suffrage, declared war against Germany for the United States. That meant that so many of the men went off to war, and the women started assuming so many of the roles in the factories and jobs that the men had. So they saw the efforts that the women put forth in 1917 and 1918, and finally in 1918, President Wilson persuaded Congress to adopt the 19th Amendment, finally, in 1919. But that was not the end. It had to be ratified. There were 48 states, and they needed 36 states to pass the ratification for the 19th Amendment. Most of the southern states were blocked against women assuming the right to vote. A lot of the southern men and women thought they were protecting women, that they were protecting the traditional roles that women held in the family. So they were very against. A lot of religious leaders were against women receiving the vote. So they went about the country and sought ratification in all the states they could. They came up with 35 sure states. But where was that 36th state? And they finally came to Tennessee, but it was a very unsure battle. This was the spring and summer of 1920. They prevailed upon the governor to convene a special legislature to meet and vote on ratification. So in 1920, in the mid of July, hot July, thousands of anti-suffragists and legislators convened in Nashville, and they were met by a welcoming committee at the train station, and they were prevailed upon to choose a rose. It was called the War of the Roses. The suffrage had the yellow rose, which was the flame of freedom fire, and the anti-suffragists had the red rose for the traditional family. So they would meet them at the train station and try to pounce upon them and pin a rose on their lapel. So they had this big fight going on and all this lobbying in the middle of July, and the session started August the 9th of 1920. Now you ask about East Tennessee, and Tennessee, of course, played a major role, and East Tennessee did. There was a woman, Byrne, from East Tennessee, Nyota, Tennessee, which is between Chattanooga and Knoxville, a little town. She was a widow, a former teacher, very well educated. At this time, she was running her farm. She could not vote, but her tenant farmers who were illiterate could go to the polls and vote. She read many newspapers and kept up with the women's suffrage movement. And she had 4 children. Her youngest son, Harry Byrne, was now in the House in the Tennessee General Assembly. And she couldn't even vote for him. He was serving his first term, just 24 years old. And so one day, during this session, while Harry was in Nashville, she sat down on her front porch and she wrote a letter to Harry. She told him about the farm and all the news around her neighborhood. And then she said, "Harry, put the rat in ratification and vote for women's suffrage." Now in Nashville, Harry was really torn because most of his constituents from Byrne County were anti-suffragist. So he's clutching this letter on August the 18th when the vote was taken. The first vote was to table this motion for ratification. Harry voted against women's rights and voted to table it. It was a tie. Then the anti-suffragists, feeling very confident that they could win, called for the vote on the amendment. Harry's clutching this letter, deciding between his mother's wishes and his constituents. And the roll call was taken, and when it came to Harry Byrne, he said, aye. He voted for women's suffrage, and the vote was changed, and it carried in Tennessee. So August the 18th, 1920 is when it became an amendment, and it was finally put into the Constitution 8 days later. It's so important because we take voting for granted. It was a long struggle. And also it was involved with racial issues, economic issues, and social issues that I think by going back and looking at this history, we will have a greater understanding of our issues today.
Thanks so much for all that information. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back in just a moment. I just wanted to get on the show today and do a public service announcement for Marsh Regional Blood Center. They have been on the show in the past, over the years, several times, and we fully support their efforts at getting donors to come in and donate blood. There are a couple of things that all of you need to know. The first being COVID-19 does not pose any known risk to blood donors during the donation process or from attending blood drives. So all of us need to get out there, attend these blood drives, and when I say all of us, those of us who are symptom-free. That is incredibly important. The next thing that they are doing is Marsh Regional is also conducting free COVID-19 antibody testing for its blood donors. This test, which is only available after donors successfully complete a pre-screening and are confirmed as eligible to give, does not indicate if someone currently has COVID-19, but it can show a previous COVID-19 infection. Gathering this information is crucial in understanding COVID-19, especially since current estimates suggest 25 to 45% of cases have mild or no symptoms. When you are registering to donate blood, donors will be asked if they have tested positive for COVID-19 and if they're willing to donate convalescent plasma to help treat patients who are critically ill with the virus. All blood, platelet, and convalescent plasma donations received until Friday, August 14th will be entered in to win a Yeti Hard Cooler prize pack. To give blood, donors need to be 17 years old, weigh 110 pounds or more, and be in good health. People with a cold, sore throat, fever, flu, or fever blisters who are taking antibiotics may not donate. Donors should eat a balanced meal before giving blood. In addition to public blood drives, donors are welcome at Marsh Regional's collection centers, 111 West Stone Drive, Suite 300 in Kingsport, 2428 Knob Creek Road in Johnson City, and 1996 West State Street in Bristol. An appointment is required before giving blood at any blood center. Donors should call 423-408-7500 or 423-652-0014 or 423-282-7090 or visit www.marshblood.com. Hi everyone, and welcome back to Inside Bristol. Well, up next, we're going to hear from Ann Dunaway for Tee It Up for Cancer. Here she is.
Hello, my name is Amy Dunaway, and I'm the Executive Director for Susan G. Komen East Tennessee. I'd like to invite you to join us for our first ever Tee It Up Against Breast Cancer at Cattails at Meadowview. That event takes place Monday, August 17th. We will begin sign-ins around 8:15 and the shotgun start will begin at 9 a.m. There will be a grab-and-go breakfast, 18 holes of golf, and then a box lunch after. 75% of the net funds we raise through this event and all of our events in the area remain in our local community. We're able to provide screening and diagnostic services for those women and men who don't have insurance or their insurance doesn't cover that. We're also able to provide patient financial assistance because when someone's battling breast cancer, their bills still need to be paid, and that's where Komen dollars come in to help. Given the unemployment in today's age, our services are needed more than ever. So please join us Monday, August 17th at Cattails at Meadowview for Tee It Up Against Breast Cancer and help us save lives together at home.
Thanks so much for sharing all of that with us, and thank you all for joining us today. We'll see you next time.